She assumed it was business as usual in court, hurtful but unavoidable. Her husband was seated on the opposite side of the table, his arm draped over the woman who had torn their marriage apart. Flashbulbs popped. Murmurs filled the air. What no one noticed, however, was the deep reservoir of strength in her eyes, or the revelation that would make this hearing turn into judgment none could anticipate. Because when the truth did come out, it was not only about betrayal, it was about power, dignity, and a system that never thought a black woman could prevail. And when the judge did finally speak, everything shifted. What occurred in that courtroom, and why did the world need to witness it? For a decade, Maya held fast to the idea of building, not breaking. She labored 2 jobs, mothered her son, and kept her marriage intact through sheer will. Her husband, David, had once vowed to her for forever. But forever began to erode when success knocked on the door, his, not hers. The suits, the smirks, the hushed telephone calls, it all started shifting him. Yet Maya continued to appear, believing in love and promises that no longer meant anything. Until the morning when a letter came. Chilly, formal, stamped with a date that would put an end to everything she had struggled for. But what she did not know was that this divorce would not only try her heart, it would reveal something much uglier. Something about privilege, race, and how justice appears differently depending on who is in front of the judge. The hearing day came like a storm Maya could not elude. The courthouse had the scent of paper and waxed floors, but underlying it was something more bitter, the silent censure that accompanied her from the parking lot to the courtroom doors. They did not have to voice it. Their eyes did. A black woman wearing a simple dress, alone, while her husband came draped in a suit, his new girlfriend attached to his arm like a trophy. David's attorney answered them with a smirk that cut deeper than words. He addressed Maya as if she were a stranger intruding on her own life. Each word was laced with condescension, describing her as bitter, unstable, undeserving of the life she'd helped create. The murmurs behind her increased. She's just after his money. He's better off without her. But Maya didn't blink. She had come with truth, not anger. What the courtroom wasn't aware of was that while David boasted of his success, every one of his businesses was founded on her sacrifices. The loans in her name, the nights she labored overtime while he networked. But now, those very sacrifices were being weaponized against her. When the judge entered, the room straightened. The proceedings started like a slow, cruel drama. David's lawyer began, weaving a smooth tale of a hard-working man stuck in an unhappy marriage. He talked of stability, progress, and image. And when he talked about race, he didn't say the word. He didn't have to. His tone did. She struggled to fit into certain circles, he said, and often became emotional in public places. Maya's chest constricted. She'd been accused of being emotional before. But she knew what that really meant here. It meant angry black woman. It meant disparage her before she even opens her mouth. When it was her turn, her attorney hardly uttered a word. He had been brought in on short notice, underfunded, overworked. The disparity was clear. David's lawyers came with briefcases, graphs, and tactics. Maya arrived with memories and heartache. But she stood firm, each word she spoke resolute, calculated, sincere. She recounted how she had believed in him when others did not, how she had sold her mother's ring to invest in his first business. But as she spoke, David would not even glance at her. He simply gripped his mistress's hand more tightly, as if recasting history in her presence. Then there was the moment that stunned the room. The judge leaned forward, requesting financial disclosures. David's lawyer smiled smugly, until Maya opened her folder. Within were bank statements, agreements, and notes that spoke another tale. One where all the empires he constructed bore her prints everywhere. one where lies went deeper than adultery. The judge's face changed. The room became quiet. For the very first time, the whispers ceased. Because what began as a routine divorce hearing was no longer about love lost, but about power, prejudice, and the system's quiet compulsion to underestimate women like Maya. And what happened next would leave everyone in that courtroom wondering what justice really looks like. The courtroom became still, each eye fixed on Maya as the papers moved along the table. Her fingers shook, not with fear, but with the burden of years at last unshackled. The judge raised one sheet, then another, his face furrowing with each line. David's lawyer shifting in his seat. The assurance which had filled the courtroom mere minutes before grew tenuous as smoke. And then the judge uttered a word, level, measured, slicing through the tension like a knife. These records indicate co-ownership. Mrs. Lewis's money was invested in your business. That is true, isn't it? David stuttered. The mistress cast her eyes downward, her impeccable composure breaking. For once, Maya did not have to say anything. The records testified on her behalf. But before hope could stir in her chest, the judge's voice turned sour. He sighed. Although her contributions are tremendous, the law calls for explicit intent, documentation of partnership. The echo of the gavel sounded like thunder. Maya's heart fell. Years of labor, sleepless nights, and sacrifices down the drain, all because of a technicality drafted to safeguard individuals who bore no resemblance to her. David's smirk reappeared, small and wicked. He leaned back, murmuring something to his attorney that elicited a stifled laugh. The injustice struck deeper than betrayal ever could, because this wasn't just a matter of losing money. It was about being invisible, inaudible, erased. Maya knew that in this courtroom, truth wasn't enough. Justice had its rules, and its rules weren't for her. But before the session closed, the judge stopped again. However, he said, these records will be examined. If any evidence provides the slightest indication of misconduct, this court will take action. David's face hardened. Maya looked him dead in the eye for the first time in months. Firm, unbroken. He had no idea yet, but she wasn't finished. Not even close. Because sometimes the system can drown your voice, but it can't take away your truth. And what Maya did afterward would make them all remember her name. Weeks went by before the verdict was delivered. The courthouse was subdued that day. No cameras, no rumors, only the noise of the clerk reciting the verdict. Maya stood by herself, her hands folded, heart firm. The judge's voice echoed in the room. For evidence of financial impropriety and fraud, the court finds for Mrs. Lewis. It was over. The business, the property, the house, all back in her name. But for Maya, the triumph had never been about money. It was about dignity, about establishing that no system, no bias could expunge her value. Outside the courtroom, journalists waited, poised to spin her anguish into news. But when Maya emerged, she didn't talk revenge or victory. She talked about justice and how nearly it had died. If I didn't have those documents, she said quietly, the truth would have perished in that room. Her narrative circulated far beyond the courtroom. Women wrote to her, strangers thanked her. Some identified their own fights in hers, the hidden racism embedded in policy, the presumptions that continue to determine who gets to be believed. Maya's resilience became more than a headline. It became a reminder that behind every narrative like hers are so many others, people still struggling to be recognized, to be heard, to be respected as equals. Because racism does not always wear a badge or scream in the streets. Sometimes it disguises itself in rules, laws, and friendly smiles in courtrooms. Maya left that day not as a victim but as proof. Proof that truth can rattle even the strongest walls when someone refuses to give up. So the question persists. How many more Mayas will it take before justice stops relying on who's sitting in the judge's chair?